Good morning. This is Mona, and this is my morning view today. Winter edition 2025. We have moved on out of fall. And look, my winter wonderland is gone. It now looks like fall, and we are starting winter. All right. Today, Memory Monday. Memory Monday. And some of the things that I remember, Right now, we're going through the Nativity series that I do every year. And sometimes it's a little bit different every year because I only have so many days to start it and finish it before Christmas. And this year I started it a little late, so it's really not having the information that I normally bring for this. However, every year it's a little different because there are times when I bring other variants to the series. So what happens is there's different theories that are out there that could possibly be. There are theories that you don't just discount just because you've been taught a certain way. This is the way you've been taught, so this is the way it is. You know, kind of like the whole three kings showed up the night of Jesus' birth. Did not happen that way at all. But in our minds, we're thinking, oh, they showed up. They followed the star, and they showed up and presented their three gifts, these three kings. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that there were three kings. They were saying that there were three gifts. Now, mind you, when they say three gifts, it doesn't give the quantity of the gifts. But remember, they are traveling to give to a king. They are bringing gifts suitable for a king. But in our mind, that's what we have. The same thing happens with the inn. Mary and Joseph go to the inn. There's no room in the inn. We have our idea of something like a hotel. There's no rooms in the hotel. Sorry. Hey, we got a stable out here. Then the stable. What does a stable look like in our mind? Some people have said, oh, it's a cave. Some people have said it's an actual, like a barnish type of thing. Some people have had it just out beyond the outskirts of the city. You know, there's differing views of what that appears like. And so when you've had all this teaching and learning of things that could be different than what your mind has in your head, that's what I do in December. I bring these variants, these various stories, these various sides of the Nativity, and I let you choose what you want. You could be like me, where I leave my mind open to any of the possibilities. None of them determine your salvation. Denominations have split over silly things like this, that it wasn't important enough to include in the Bible. Well, why would God not feel it's important enough? Well, people don't read the whole Bible as it is because, lack of time or lack of fortitude or lack of whatever the reasoning is. There are people that have read the Bible in entirety. You have those people that read it in a year. They do the series. Now, I am not a component of reading the Bible in a year because I want to be able to chew on the cud. Okay? So, I am a proponent of having a Bible, read the year in a Bible program. That way you can check it off as you're going to make sure you don't skip any of it. But not in the time frame that they want it. So that's me personally, how I would do it. Nothing's wrong with reading the Bible in a year as long as you go back and you chew on some cud in between, All right. off of my high horse, moving right along to the nativity scene. So I talked about the census last week, and I talked about that's another thing of our perspective of what things should look like. We've always been celebrating it in the month of December, and so we have in our head this little winter scene, and the songs, the Christmas carols on a cold winter's night, but there are variant ideas of when the nativity, when Christ was actually born, and some of that is in the springtime when lambs are born, or in the fall, like right around Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, for me, Yom Kippur seems like a good space for when that could have happened. And then we have the December, Christmas, December 24th, 25th, depending on what country you live in. So we have all these preconceived ideas on our mind, and we're like, well, this is how it is, and anybody that brings anything else, it's just heresy. But it's not, because it doesn't determine your salvation. Now, I talked about the census last week, and about how they wouldn't have had the census in the middle of winter, or beginning of winter, because winter just started. Winter just started because it would be a difficult travel for people to do. And the Romans they were harsh, but I don't think they would have been that harsh. They still had some sort of humanity to them. They weren't out to kill the inhabitants. They wanted to assimilate the inhabitants, much like the Greeks. That's why you had the Hellenistic Jews. That's why you had the area of the Decapolis that was on beyond the Jordan River. So they weren't out to oust everybody. They did not think kindly on those that were trying to do assertion or I'm trying to think of the word that I'm looking for. It's like the Zealots. The Zealots were out to dethrone the Roman Empire in their region. They wanted the Romans out, and they wanted their own king and their own way of life, and so they were. Well, that's where we get the word zealous from, because they were compassionate, and they were passionate, not compassionate. They were passionate about what they felt was right, and they would go to any extreme to do what needed to be done. Kind of like the jihadists, okay? All right. So moving right along, they traveled from Nazareth to Bethlehem. I almost said it backwards. From Nazareth to Bethlehem. It was about 80, 90 miles difference between the two. There was terrain. You had to go up to get there in elevation. And so you have a pregnant woman who's ready to go anytime, and you're going basically on foot. At some point, I'm sure she may have rode the donkey in order to get to where they were going, but more than likely the donkey had supplies, and they probably started out on foot. And then, as the supplies started to diminish a little bit, it gave some space for Mary on the donkey. And so it would take 4 to 10 days to get from Bethlehem I mean, from Nazareth to Bethlehem, 4 to 10 days. But given that Mary's condition, I would go with the later. So I would say about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks. And that's why last week I said 1 to 2 weeks. But I would give it 2 weeks for Mary's condition, that she wouldn't be able to travel as quickly. So she gets down to Bethlehem. Mind you, they traveled slower than everyone else. So therefore, they got there a little later than everyone else. The houses, there was different styles of houses depending on your wealth. You had single stories that looked like a U shape. Okay, so you would have the living quarters, then you would have the guest room, and then you would have the barn. Because they did not live that far away from Jerusalem. So for them, they could raise their own sacrifices. But when you had a sacrificial lamb or such, you had to bring it in with the family. Get to know it. You wouldn't leave it out there for everybody. You weren't shepherds. The shepherds were shepherds. You're not a shepherd, but you have your own animals. You have your own donkey. Perhaps you own your own cow. Perhaps you own your own sheep. But it would not be like you're a farm. These were animals that helped you to survive in that time period. So, you would keep your lamb safe because that was going to be your sacrificial lamb. So they have this barn-ish attached to the house. A space, a stable to house their animals. There's also 2-level houses where you had rooms here, and then you had another room up here, and then you may have had a stable down below on the other side. You may have had when we lived in Germany, I remember going to several different farmers' homes where the barn was underneath the house. Their house was up top, just a house, regular house, living room, kitchen, bedrooms. Down below is where they kept their livestock, whether it was a pig farmer or whether it was a cattle farmer. That's where their animals resided. So it's not odd to have a barn underneath your house, just because we don't live like that in the United States. So there's different variations of homes depending on what you did and how you what your occupation was and what your income was, your income level. So when they came to Bethlehem, they probably went to a family member first. Family member. And so, because he was from that lineage. But there was already other guests there. And, oh yeah, here's a pregnant woman showing up at your home. Now, in most civilized cases, you would give the pregnant woman the bed. You would hope to think that. But remember, there's a little bit of scandal involved here between Joseph and Mary and this baby. And so, it's a possibility that they're like, oh no, absolutely not. I'm not going to give my bed up for that hussy. No, ain't happening here, And they don't have to. They got there first. Right? They got there first. They got there before Mary and Joseph. So here we are. There's a guest room and it's full from all the other travelers. But there's room in the stable where are the lambs kept. In the stable. So it's quite possible that they ended up in that like U-shaped room. Or in the house that had the double layers and then had the stable just on the other side, underneath. Or it's quite possible that there was just no room anywhere because they went from place to place, but all the places were filled from the travelers that were coming for the census. So what normally was a couple of hundred people in the town, now their resources are stretched to the limit. Their infrastructure is stretched, and there is literally nowhere else to reside, where to go. So there's a tower called the Tower of Magdal. And it's where, I always get them mixed up. We'll just say Jacob's other wife, not Leah. I think it was Rebecca. It may have been Rachel. I'm always getting Isaac and Jacob's wives mixed up. But anyways, so Leah's sister, that is where she gave birth to Benjamin. Remember, his name was Benoni. Benjamin was born there, and then Rachel, see, I want to say Rachel, maybe Rebecca, Leah's sister, died. She had a hard birth of pregnancy, and she passed away. My fingers are starting to get really cold and painful. So here this space is. And there's this tower where the shepherds could go up and watch the fields from a distance. It is the space where the lambs for the temple were raised. Remember, Bethlehem is not far from Jerusalem. It was like even a half day walk. Not far. It's like 5 miles. 5-6 miles. So it's not even half day. Couple hours. Well, I stroll. So, if you were gonna run it, you would probably get there very quickly. But if you're traveling with animals, it may take a little bit longer. Especially a herd of sheep. Because they just meander and walk. And I've witnessed shepherds in Germany walking the sheep through certain areas and then crossing the road, and you had to wait for the sheep to cross the road. So it could take a while. But they were very close. And the shepherds that raised the sheep for the temple sacrifices, they had certain purification rituals that they had to go through. So it's not just the idea, again, we're going back to what we've been taught, this idea that shepherds were scummy, dirty, filthy, thievery, it was those low lives that nobody wanted to deal with. Remember, Abraham was a shepherd. David was a shepherd. So it's kind of funny that the father of their nation and the king of their nation, that the lineage of the Messiah would come through, were shepherds. And yet they're going to have this prejudice against shepherds. But for the temple shepherds, they would be a little bit higher standard than your average shepherd. They still had to do all the things that the shepherds did, but they also had purification things that they had to go through. And they would have been at the stables near this Tower of Magdal. Got hair in my mouth. So when the angels appeared to the shepherds, the shepherds would have known exactly where it was. They didn't have to go searching through the town of normal several hundred to probably well over 1,000 at this point. It probably doubled, possibly tripled in size overnight of the amount of people there. So they wouldn't have had to try to get through all of this space. They would know exactly where to go. So these are a couple of ideas that you can ponder in your head of what could it have possibly been like for the shepherds. Would they have come to a house where the stable was connected, or were they just on the outskirts where the stable for the temple shepherds would have taken care of their sheep? They would have had claws there, swaddling claws for the lambs, because when they're born, they would wrap their legs in these linen claws in order that they don't get a blemish, because the temple shepherds, the temple sheep could not have a blemish. They had to be spotless. And that's not just lack of birth defects or coloration. That had to do with no wounds. So they had to protect them. And so they would have all of that there and available. So before I completely get frostbite on my fingers, I'm going to leave it with that for today. Okay, we'll talk about the angels that we've heard on high. We'll talk about the star. We'll talk about different things tomorrow. But for now, this is where I've got it, because we're coming to a close real quick, where we're trying to get all the little detailed informations about the nativity in just a couple of days. Go over to YouTube, Mona E. Harrison. Click subscribe, like, share, comment, and get notifications, get all the bells and whistles. Go over there and you can peruse other content, and this one will be uploaded tonight or tomorrow, probably even sooner than that, possibly. So we'll leave you with that. Blessings, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.